This is going to be a video where I go over a 4-round mock draft that I completed over the weekend, focusing on 3 teams, obviously the Ravens, Lions, and Seahawks. I would usually conduct my mock drafts individually, meaning one video on the Ravens haul, one video on the Lions, etc. In this case, I had to compile them all into one video that kind of encompasses all of the decisions that I can foresee. Most of the selections that I made here, I'm obviously pretty happy with. Others not so much, and I'll go over that during the course of the video. Again, this is a 4-round mock draft. All of the players that I'm picking through are guys that are selected for either the Ravens, Lions, or the Seahawks. I try to, when I do a mock draft, I try to maintain as much realism as possible. And at least one of the players here, Colton Hood, if not two, are kind of throws a wrench in that thought process, to be honest with you, that approach. And I'll get to those situations that I find the most unrealistic as far as who is available in a certain location. But in any way, what I did was I controlled all 3 teams, and then I enabled trade prompts from other franchises. I ended up taking one that I think we could see replicated. It's a trade back scenario or option for the Lions that ends up really working out in their favor, if you ask me. I could see them recouping a second or a 3rd round pick. But let's get to it. I think probably one of the most fun and challenging endeavors that I have done recently as far as trying to produce content. We've been doing so much work on our website, which obviously I'm using to display these players here, the selections that I'll basically focus on for the first 2 or actually 3 rounds. DraftSignal.pro is the website. The mock drafts have been a diversion for me, generally, from in between breaking up all of those hours of work, okay? We were trying to get something off the ground organically, this website. And so the mock drafts was just me being able to mentally break away from that mountain of work, if you will. This one, however, was quite intentional. Trying to navigate the steps and then document them as well at each turn. So that's what I'll do here in a moment as we get started. I will offer some commentary on the options that were there at each time. We're going to start, obviously, with the Ravens at pick 14. The Lions begin with pick 17. I will trade back. And then the Super Bowl champion Seahawks waiting at the end of round 2. Personally, I didn't want to do any mock drafts until the work, the film work, the scouting, organization of the website was done, and got me to a point where personally I felt prepared enough to comment on these situations. So the options that might occur here at 14, 17, 32, and then beyond, trying to recreate or preview maybe the choices that each of these teams is going to have to make in those situations or in those moments. So going through this mock draft, the first decision that I had to make was an easy one. Ruben Bain fell to 14, which I do not foresee happening. This is not, however, the unrealistic situation that I'm referring to. We see great players fall to that range before. As Ravens fans, obviously Kyle Hamilton selected at 14 in the 2022 draft. Ruben Bain, one of the best pass rushers, edge defenders in college football last season. Tremendous production, obviously, and then run defense. You can see the choices that are available on the right-hand side of the screen here. Ruben Bain, Spencer Fenno, Lemon, Sadiq, etc. I was hoping that he wasn't there for this endeavor, for this piece of content that I was trying to produce. I've got his picture pulled up from the website on the left-hand side. Ioane, Fano, even a Blake Miller I don't think is an option for Baltimore at 14. But in a trade-back scenarios, the Ravens, or even the Lions, in fact, looks like a great landing place for Blake Miller, a right tackle with tremendous athleticism, but, wasn't an option here for me. Keldrick Falk at 19, and also Dylan Thieneman being at the bottom of that list. These are just the top players that were highlighted. I took Bain. I kind of wanted to address offensive line here, to be honest with you. I think that's the move for the Ravens. This is really the second draft in a row, I should say, where an edge defender falling has, in my opinion, if it goes down this way, I should say, has interrupted the Ravens' attempt to address offensive line. Mike Green being available late round 2 last year, they did not foresee. I don't think anyone did, right? But it delayed the Ravens trying to address offensive line, and I think had a trickle-down effect in the 2025 season. The offensive line was terrible. Emory Jones was not able to play physically because of an injury that everyone knew about at the time of the draft. So this happening a second year in a row, I could see people being frustrated, but I don't think you could be disappointed with talent like Ruben Bain being available, giving the Ravens Bain, Tavius Robinson, who, if you're a Lions fan or Seahawks fan, tune in and don't know who he is, extremely physical. Think basically a better version of Keldrick Falk. Tavius Robinson, however, was a fourth-round pick a couple of years ago, so I recognize people may not like that comparison. Essentially a really good run defender, big, long, and athletic. Probably never get above the 6'8", maybe 10 sack production in a season. I'm talking about Tavius Robinson. But if you draft a Ruben Bain, of course, that's going to limit those opportunities for him. But they got Tavius Robinson, obviously signed Trey Hendrickson in free agency, and drafted Mike Green last year. Gives you a great foursome of edge rushers, along with Nnamdi Madubuike and Travis Jones, assuming that Madubuike is able to return to full health. So as the Lions pick came up for number 17, Keldrick Falk has gone off the board. Caden Proctor is still there. The choices for the Lions at Detroit are on the right-hand side. Again, I'm just recreating or documenting for you the thought process and an attempt to forecast or maybe preview the types of decisions that are going to occur as I see it. And your opinion and many others will obviously be very different. So I do not have the Lions jumping in on Caden Proctor here at 17 for a variety of reasons. Number one, while I do think he's a first-round pick and a 2 or maybe even 3 seasons from now, he could end up being one of the best tackles in this draft. Personally, I like Ahinachor, the right tackle from Arizona State, as the guy who I think 2 or 3 years from now looks like one of the best. But I recognize that 17 would be a great place for Proctor to be selected. But in the middle of that thought process, at least when I went through this endeavor, I was presented with, or at the beginning of that thought process, I was presented with this opportunity to trade back by the Texans. So giving up pick 17, but recouping another second-round pick at 50, and that was too enticing for me to pass up, with the opportunity to maybe select another offensive tackle later in the first round. I was taking a chance a little bit, to be honest with you. Blake Miller was still out there. Fano I didn't think would be available, and sure enough, he did go off the board. I accepted this trade back scenario because I thought it gave Brad Holmes and the front office an opportunity to almost recreate the 2023 draft in a sense. And what I mean is trade back the Jahmyr Gibbs, trade back eschewing or electing not to take Bijan Robinson and instead get Gibbs at 12. Also get another, I think, second-round pick. And in this case, the differential is similar, but the location, the range is different. So I take the pick at 50 to move back, 59, which gives them picks 50 and 59 in pretty quick succession, and still holds on to a first-round draft pick to hopefully address right tackle. I think a lot of Lions fans, or at least some of the ones that I've encountered either in my Discord or in comment sections on videos I've produced, would be a little disappointed if you come out of round 1 and don't take a tackle to give you that fifth-year option, or even an edge defender. Say Ruben Bain is there at 17, which I don't think will occur. But in any case, I have Detroit taking Blake Miller. Again, this is pick 28 in a trade back scenario with the Texans. Miller was there at 17. Had another trade back option, I think, for 24, but thought this one looked better. Recouping a second-round pick, like I said, at number 59. If you're at all interested, Chris Aguilera, who is a Ravens fan, but he's done the bulk of the offensive line work for our DraftSignal.pro website. He's got an evaluation on here based on his opinion, and I will tell you that super underrated football analyst in terms of the number of followers that he has on Twitter. I would say, and I recommended him to Will Rock, that if someone's looking for a guy to come on and talk about all of the different offensive linemen, Chris will be one of the first guys that I would select, because he doesn't have any preconceived bias. When I read his evaluations and then I watch the film, and oh, by the way, the website, the player profile, for Blake Miller has 2 different, about 3, each video is about 3 or 4 minutes long, where you can go look at some of the film yourself. It's at the bottom. I'm not going to play it here because it's not the reason for this endeavor. But Blake Miller, super athletic in my opinion. I liked his ability to move. Long-term projection, 2, 3, 4 years down the road, maybe Proctor looks better, or even Ahinachor. But this is a guy who I think Detroit could probably put in there at right tackle pretty quickly. Move Penei Sewell over to left tackle if that's the direction that they want to go. All right, so to finish the first round after Detroit takes Blake Miller, here's the options that are available for Seattle at pick 32. Did get one trade back option. I think Seattle would be smart to retain the 5th-year option and take someone, whether it's a position player. So we're going to go through this first with the offensive line. So on the right-hand side, You can see Pregnon, that is the player that I ended up selecting for Seattle, along with Besantis, Rutledge, and some other guys who are going to be taken later in the draft at offensive line. They're available. The one that surprised me a little bit, Colton Hood stuck around in this simulation a lot longer. When I finished this mock draft and decided to present it, I actually went back and simulated like 3 or 4 more. Colton Hood kept lasting until like pick 35, pick 38, maybe pick 40. So perhaps that's just where he's going to go, or where a lot of people have him projected in their mock drafts. And so, I guess over time, the mock draft simulator adjusts. The edge defender position is getting rated right about now as I go through the end of the first round. Malachi Lawrence is still there, someone I think that Seattle probably is looking at if they were to trade back from 32. R. Mason Thomas, who seems to be moving up boards. A couple of other more singular players like Gabe Akkus, Derek Moore, I would say more run defense based, but pass rush talent, especially in the case of Derek Moore. And then down at the bottom, Romello Height, Joshua Josephs, more pass rush focused guys as far as their college film goes. In addition, at the cornerback position, like I said, Hood, Chris Johnson, D'Angelo Pons, Keontae Scott, who, we would expect some of those guys to be on the board. In the end, for me, as far as Seattle goes, I could not resist taking Pregnon, who, once again, if you have checked out our website at all, one of the best evaluators that we've been lucky to have is Chris Aguilera, and he's gone over a ton of the offensive linemen, and in this case got a really in-depth 2-paragraph evaluation of Pregnon if you want to check it out, and then some film of him playing left guard for Oregon in 2025. In taking Pregnon there at the end of round 1, pick 32, the Seahawks passed up on an opportunity to get Jadarian Price, who's still on the board. And in fact, he will go off the board between pick 59 and pick 64 for Seattle, which I think illustrates the quandary that they're in as far as where they want to try to take a running back. And that's why I mentioned a moment ago a trade back up. It's one of the reasons why I mentioned a trade back option. The Jadarian Price player profile on our website, draftsignal.pro, has 2 evaluations from Seahawks-related analysts and evaluators, Dan Viennes and then Josh Height, and as well as some film at the bottom that kind of gives you an idea of the explosive runs that Jadarian Price put up, in 2025. In addition, even though he only had 8 catches, you get a real idea, if you were to click on this one in the bottom right, of his potential on screens or designed pass concepts. All right, so we'll move into the second round. Again, this is a 4-round mock that I conducted, selecting or controlling the Ravens, Lions, and Seahawks. And in this case, we're talking about pick 45 for Baltimore. I didn't get any trade back options, having not selected an offensive lineman at 14 because, Ruben Bain fell in the Ravens' laps. Obviously, it's going to be a focus. Chase Besantis is a guy that we've got 2 evaluations of on our website. I'm going to go over on the right-hand side some of the players, the talent level that's there. First of all, not that you would select an edge defender 2 picks in a row for Baltimore, but just to give you an idea of how it's being rated. At that point in time, late first round, early into the second round, a ton of edge defenders are going off the board. Maybe we see something like that happen in between day 1 and day 2. Unsure. My guess is if you saw a bunch of edge defenders fly off the board in the 20s, ending at pick 32 or somewhere in that area, that you'd probably see some repositioning of certain teams who want to get players like a Cassius Howe or like a Malachi Lawrence, who we talked about a moment ago. So the receiver position has also similarly been picked apart. Jeremy Bernard is still there. Malachi Fields, more of an X receiver. I do like Elijah Surratt a ton. He actually played high school football in Baltimore at St. Francis Academy. Ted Hurst, Bryce Lance, maybe lesser known or lower level quality of football. Some would say North Dakota State at this point is pretty proven product, if you ask me. But Bryce Lance being a guy who had a historic 2024 and followed it up with a really impressive 2025. In the end, I took Besantis. And it was, primarily because the Ravens need some talent at guard. They certainly signed John Simpson and drafted Emory Jones the year before. Got 2 different evaluators whose opinions I trust. Chris Aguilera, once again, and then E.A. Edgar Allen, who's a Ravens content creator. And they've got their own evaluations on here that speak quite highly of Besantis. I will be honest with you, I've only watched the film of Besantis when evaluating defensive tackles, defensive ends in in the um, in the SEC. So I didn't do it. That's why I didn't do an evaluation on him. I didn't feel like I had studied it enough to provide an opinion like some of these other guys. He's the next best guy available, or the best guy available. As an aside, there is, I think, a 6 or 7 minute video here available at the bottom of the page on DraftSignal.pro if you want to check out some of the film of him. This is the pick that I think presents the dilemma for Baltimore. If someone drops in your lap at 14 that you can't pass up, like a Reuben Bain, or even a Sadiq. I know Ken from Film Study Ravens is really high on him, and I think he's super talented. I'm just using him as an example, a guy that maybe the Ravens front office feels like they can't let pass off the board, even in a trade back scenario. Then that does perhaps reduce the quality of the guards that you're selecting from. Instead of Iwane from Penn State, or even a Pregnon from Oregon, you're talking about a guy like Besantis, who's a good football player in my opinion, but someone that would be, he's in the second tier or maybe even the third below those first level guys, at least in this draft. And so one part of the decision in taking Besantis, who personally, like I said, I like as a player, but also, gives you an idea of the decision making that EDC and the front office are going to have to make, is will a guy like Keelan Rutledge be available at 80? What's the quality that's going to be there in round 3? And I think they just cannot pass up on going guard or interior offensive lineman here at 45, at least as it played out when I did this mock draft. Your own simulations or your own mocks are going to look different. Conceptually, it rivals 2022 with Kyle Hamilton being taken at 14. In this case, the Hamilton is Reuben Bain. And then Tyler Linderbaum being taken as a result of a trade with the Arizona Cardinals in the first round. Besantis, not a first-round talent. Neither is Rutledge, but the idea here is that waiting to address it until round 3 just might not be good enough, and we might be recreating last year's draft where we had to settle for Emory Jones in the third round. Moving forward here to the Lions' predetermined pick at number 50, meaning the selection that they came into the draft holding, not the trade back one, but still you have to take those, in this scenario, have to take that into consideration, that you have another selection 9 choices later. Like I said, with each of the last 2 picks, the edge defender spot has been rated at this point. You do have Colton Hood still on the board. Jacob Rodriguez, really talented inside linebacker. Couple of defensive tackles, nose tackle / type guys on the board, as well as Christian Miller. I think is one of the more impressive guys to watch his technique and his movement skills and strength, but just doesn't have necessarily the production. You can see Jadarian Price is still on the board. Of course, he's not an option for Detroit, but keeping in mind that the Seattle Seahawks would be sitting here looking at players going off the board. I do think that if the Lions were able to get consecutive picks in a row, that they could be a little bit more free in their thought process. And I will tell you, I'm going to take Colton Hood here. I don't know that he's going to be available at pick 50. I think his cap is probably 38, 42, somewhere in that range. So if you want a guy like him, I entertained Eli Stowers, even though personally I'm a guy that thinks Detroit has to address the edge defender position in the first or the second round. We know that entering the draft a month from now, they actually only hold pick 17 and pick 50. So they would have to address edge and or tackle in those first 2 selections. Having recouped or traded back and got a third pick in the top 59, I entertained Eli Stowers because he's super talented as a receiver, and he's a guy that, well, basically I thought that you could still get the opportunity to draft, an edge defender at 59. Dani-Dennis Sutton, Joshua Josephs still being there on the board, available as players to select. And knowing that Detroit wants to address the position, it makes me worry about a trade back scenario, someone trading in front, if you're sitting at pick 50. And everyone knows what you're trying to do, and has already been a run on the edge defender position. It makes me worry that someone would try to trade up in front of them at 47, 48, or 49. But as you can see, the edge defender position has been whittled down, chopped up, and I gave some thought to Sutton. I gave some thought to, like I said, Eli Stowers. But in the end, I picked Colton Hood for Detroit. I know that there's safety issues from a health standpoint with Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch, who I don't really expect to be back until at least midseason, if not later on. There's 2 evaluations that are here, both by Seahawks guys. Dan Vien, Seahawks Forever, did a great breakdown here of Colton Hood on the DraftSignal.pro website. In addition, at the bottom, there's, I think, 6 interceptions from 2024 and 2025. There's actually mislabeled there. It says only 2025. And then some film while he was at Colorado in 2024, if you wanted to go check out anything about Colton Hood. The turnaround was obviously quite quick, getting from Colton Hood at 50 to taking Dani-Dennis Sutton at 59. Again, this was a result of a trade back with the Texans where we gave up pick 17 and a late 5th, I believe, or early 5th, excuse me, for selections 28 and 59, which was this one, allowing Brad Holmes 3 picks, basically in the top 60. Here's the edge defender group that is available. I'm talking about, this group here on the right-hand side. That's the group that's available. You can see that it's been, really cut down. LT Overton is one that I think fits the Lions' style. If they had a 3rd-round pick, if they had a choice, mid-3rd round or wherever they should be, LT Overton could possibly be there. And he's a guy that fits the style that most people say Detroit wants. I think Dani-Dennis Sutton does as well. Romello height, more of a speed rush type guy. He's also, a little bit older. I think he's 24 already, or he'll turn 24. Dani-Dennis Sutton's a Maryland guy, played at Penn State. Great production from a sack standpoint the last 2 years, 8.5 sacks each. Tends to play a little high. Maybe some have referred to him as somewhat stiff. I have a comp for him as Boye Mafe, but another one is Jadeveon Clowney. Because he plays a little bit upright, and Clowney, sometimes the moves aren't as technical as you'd want them to be, or they don't land perfectly or even at perfect timing, but they still work. And that's kind of how I would describe Dennis Sutton. But in some situation where Brad Holmes and the front office don't want to address it, here's the other players that were on the board when I made this selection. Again, it's at pick 59. Eli Stowers, still there. A.J. Halsey, a safety from LSU, who came into the year 2025, I think, as a late day 2, early day 3 type of projection. I'm talking about at the beginning of the 2025 season, is now a late 1st round or solidly more so a 2nd round pick, in my opinion. In the end, I decided to go with Sutton. I do think it's unrealistic for Colton Hood to be there at 50, but this is probably the draft, the Lions one here, the one that I feel the most strongly about, or the most confident in, meaning they are able to get so much talent. And again, we've still got 2 more rounds to go through, rounds 3 and round 4. If you're interested, on the DraftSignal.pro website in Dani-Dennis Sutton or any of the other edge defenders, we've got his player eval by myself. That's the only one that anyone turned in. And significant film at the bottom, including one of the most dominant games that I saw for anyone on film in 2025. He had 2 sacks, a blocked punt against Michigan State. That's the 2nd linked up video there at the bottom. If you're interested in previewing the entire edge group, you're more than welcome to visit the DraftSignal.pro website that I'm displaying here. Click on the edge defender filter, and it will give you a ton of the edge defender group. There's still 2 other guys that we intend to add. As an aside, we've added some guys from lesser-known programs, Nadame Tucker from Western Michigan, Michael Heldman from Central Michigan. Both of those guys had fantastic 2025 seasons. When I made this pick for Dennis Sutton, I knew that Detroit didn't have another selection until the 4th round. I think it's pick 118. And I think it's a very unique situation for them, trying to recreate almost that same turn from 2023 where they took Laporta early in round 2, of course, selection 34. Branch at 45, no idea how Branch was there. And then Hendon Hooker late in the 2nd round. I know it didn't work out for him. This is a really great start, if you ask me, for Detroit. Blake Miller, Colton Hood, and you're still able to address the edge defender spot with someone of significant talent, size and speed, and measurables as well in Dani-Dennis Sutton. So we're moving to the end of round 2, where the Seahawks will make their 2nd pick, and the issue for John Schneider and their front office is that by passing up on running back at the end of round 1, the quality, the differential, as far as what's available, it changed. So when Detroit selected Sutton at 59 in this scenario that I'm presenting, Jadarian Price is still on the board. But by the time Seattle gets to make their choice, he's not. He's been taken. The following guys on the right-hand side, we're talking about this group of players, are available for them. Of course, I'm going to take Mike Washington. I think his film looks great from 2025. I know it was his 3rd school The high level production had not necessarily occurred prior to 2025. I went back and watched some 2023 and 24 film. It didn't look that different to me. I mean, maybe got a little bit bigger and stronger. I think the film looks really impressive. The scores, I mean, 4.33 40 fits great. Looks to me like he would fit into, a zone or outside zone scheme perfectly. No one that you pick at 64, in my opinion, is going to be able to come in and give you what Kenneth Walker III did, specifically at the end of the season. So that's the issue that's there for John Snyder and the Seahawks front offices. If Jadarian Price is still on the board, mid to late second round, at what point do they try to actually trade up? They don't have many choices or many picks in this draft, I should say. So perhaps that's not an option for them. They're just going to take whoever's available at the end of round 2, or look at a trade back scenario to end of round 1 and take Jadarian Price and some other high-level talent. Mike Washington, very talented guy, if you ask me, from watching the film. Other options that were available that I thought were interesting, A.J. Halsey, safety still on the board near the end of round 2, or right at the end of round 2 here. Keontae Scott, a dedicated nickel DB from Miami. If you're interested in checking out stuff about Mike Washington or any other running back, we've got an evaluation again from Dan Viennes from Seahawks Forever, and then a ton of run concepts from Mike Washington that I actually cut up personally at the bottom of his player profile page on our website, draftsignal.pro. I'm going to move into round 3 of this scenario, this simulation mock draft, where I'm controlling the Ravens, Lions, and the Seahawks. So it's going to go quick for this one because Detroit doesn't have a selection here as a result of, a couple of trades they've done over the years. Pick 80, the first one for the Ravens, the only one for the Ravens, I should say, in round 3. I'll be honest with you, I get buyer's remorse here, and I get buyer's remorse as soon as I click the button. There's a lot of talent on the board here. Offensive line talent in particular. You can see the options that are available. I'm just showing from the mock draft database website what was available or on the board for Baltimore. They don't need an edge defender at this point, having signed Trey Hendrickson and then drafted Ruben Bain, but I felt compelled to at least click on the edge defender position because I've been trained to. We all have, as far as the Ravens' needs. Wide receiver group looks pretty good as far as what's there at 80. I don't think they need, someone like necessarily a Zachariah Branch. Really like Elijah Surratt. Already established that. Then you've got your athletic speedsters, if you will. Bryce Lance, Deion Burks, Brendan Thompson, smaller, maybe only 1 year of high-level production at Mississippi State. Just updated his profile yesterday. And then the offensive line is interesting to me as a possibility to be addressed here at 80. That'll tell us, I think, if the Ravens are serious about upgrading that position. In hindsight, personally, that's what I should have done. I should have, gone after, whether it's Lou, Slaughter, Jones, etc., someone to try to upgrade the Ravens' offensive line from a competition and a depth standpoint, because losing Tyler Linderbaum creates a massive hole there that Bullock nor the free agent signee from the Falcons, I think, is going to be able to fill to the level that the Ravens really need in Jesse Minter's first season and the first year of a new offense that we presume is going to be more under center with a lot of outside zone or stretch concepts. I watched this video, which I'm going to let finish up here in a moment, of me clicking the button for the player I selected. And look, I really like this guy. Okay, I've watched his film a ton. I'm actually going to do some Twitter film studies on college offenses in the offseason. I can't present the film on YouTube for obvious reasons. I picked Bryce Lance here. And even every time that I see this video that's playing now on you guys' screen, I'm like, why did I click that button? I have his player comp as Christian Watson, which is, a little ironic or unusual because they're from the same school. I like the player. I enjoyed watching the film. He does make contested catches, and so there's a lot of talent there. Do I think he's going to go in the third round? Yes, I do. I think he'll be a third round or early fourth round guy. I do not agree with the projections that have Bryce Lance as a fifth. I even saw one that was a sixth round draft projection. I just don't see that. Too much talent on the board, too much ability to make plays. But I recognize that the quality of opponent, the DBs he was facing, is a factor. I didn't do a evaluation of him on our draftsignal.pro website, but there's a ton of film from 2025. And then 2024 was just nasty. 17 touchdowns, I think on 80 touches. Maybe I did my math wrong, but the film doesn't lie. If you want to check it out, go right ahead. We'll move on to the Seahawks' third selection, end of round 3, here in a moment. But I wish I could lie and say that I was trying to recreate reality for the Ravens in round 3, meaning EDC in the front office, I think, have been pretty solid first and second round, if not spectacular at times in their last 3, 4, 5 years of making selections. And then things seem to kind of go haywire at times. So maybe I wish I could tell you that I was trying to recreate that dynamic. No, I pretty much did the same thing myself with taking Bryce Lance there when, there were opportunities at corner, offensive line, or even D tackle. So here's what's on the board when Seattle goes to make their pick at 96. You got, pretty good receiver group still existing, in my opinion. The edge group, which Seattle, DeMarcus Lawrence returned. They did allow Boye Mafe to leave in free agency. Still got Derek Hall is a big factor there. Uchenna Nwosu, I think, is in the last year of his contract. Makes sense to me for Seattle to address the edge defender position. LT Overton still on the board. He would be an interesting candidate, in my opinion, in Seattle because, some of you may not know LT Overton, who played at Alabama, was a 5-star recruit who reclassified, but he reclassified to graduate early. He was, I think, the number 3 recruit in his class, and then make like February or March or something like that, reclassified to graduate early. So, he's probably taking online classes or extra classes, whatever, to satisfy the graduation requirements for his school. Reclassified to get to Alabama sooner. Didn't redshirt once. Am I a huge fan of LT Overton's film? I am not. However, tremendous talent, number one. Extremely young. And a guy like him, if you put him in Mike McDonald's system, I could see him playing well in that system because he got some versatility, number one. Very, very big and strong. Not necessarily known as a pass rush guy, but look, a lot of what Seattle does is some orchestrated or designed pass rush stunts or schemes that kind of help guys get freed up. What are you going to get at pick 96 as far as a player who's going to get organic wins? I guess maybe Joshua Josephs. I do like the corner group, the corner talent, that existed here. Julian Neal, Devin Moore would be the first and foremost among them. If you're trying to recreate the Reek Woolen dynamic, you could take either of the 2 corners at Washington, maybe a little bit early, but Taco Davis, is a pretty talented player who's got great ball skills that somewhat can give you some idea of recreating that Reek Woolen magic. In the end, I ended up taking Zakee Wheatley. I'm a little biased, probably, number one. Number two, I do like Bud Clark's film a lot. He did spend, I think, 6 years at TCU, one of which was an injury redshirt. But the same thing exists for Zakee Wheatley. He was there for a while. He is 24 years old. He's a Maryland guy. In fact, he went to high school with Mansour Delane. So there's a ton of talent coming from Penn State at the DB position in the last 4 or 5 or 6 years. I'm not sure who put the player comp here, Jesse Bates. I don't believe it was me. But I almost put like a Jaquan Brisker because Wheatley can kind of move around and play anywhere. He's long, almost 6'3", started almost 60 games at Penn State. We do have a ton of film of him either on the DraftSignal.pro website at the bottom or in our Google Drive that we share with people. There's 2 evaluations, one of which I did, and the other was done by Jason Smith. So that's who we took here at pick 96 for the Seahawks. I thought about Julian Neal, Devin Moore, and again, even though I'm not a personal huge fan of LT Overton, I felt like he was a guy that would be a possibility here because he's got positional versatility, number one. He's exceptional at reading and reacting to his key. And so what I mean is LT Overton plays very disciplined, and whatever his key does, whether it's a tight end or a tackle, or if he's lined up on the inside of a guard, he'll react the way that he's supposed to according to the scheme and his assignment. As an aside here, as we finish round 3, talking about the 4-round mock that I'm conducting for the Ravens, Lions, and Seahawks. If you haven't done so, we've got a draft board that is pretty close to being completed. I think we've got too many players in rounds 1 and rounds 2. You do have to scroll a little bit to the right to pick up some of the other positions. Quarterback, tight end, running back. The ones that are going to have less players chosen early, we kind of tucked over there to the right. The only drawback to that is guys like Caleb Downs, Sonny Styles, Arvil Reese. They're off screen for you in the initial presentation. Caleb Downs is actually visible. But in any case, it goes all the way down to round 7. You can click on a player link to go to their player profile page. A, to go check out, if we have any film of them or any evaluations. B, to see where, we have them projected to go. This is based on our evaluations and not anything that will be considered consensus. The final round of picks here is also similarly quick. Seattle does not have a fourth round pick, so Baltimore is going to get one at 115, and then a couple in a row for Detroit, 118 and 128. So here's the players that are on the board for the Ravens initially. I do go offensive line. I take the center from Florida, Jake Slaughter. The corners that are still on the board, a little bit surprising to me that Julian Neal and Devin Moore are still there. We're talking about pick 115. I like Moore and Neal a lot as value picks in round 4, having not addressed the offensive line at all. The center position at all. At this point, only taking Besantis at the interior offensive line, the guard position with pick 45. I would feel remiss if I didn't go center here and give Baltimore another option at center, some competition for Bullock and the free agent that they brought in from Atlanta. Tight end still on the board. This is a deep group at tight end. I really like Eli Raridan, to be honest with you. E.A. Edgar Allen was a guy who really first kind of pointed me to him. Raridan suffered a catastrophic knee injuries, I think his senior year of high school and then his freshman year at Notre Dame. And so the production doesn't necessarily fit, the level of blocking that he offers, number one. Number two, his ability as a pass catcher. I think he's a hidden talent in this draft. But Justin Jolie from NC State being available there, looks like a great choice for the Ravens and or the Lions 3 picks later. So the offensive line group that was available, Slaughter and Jones being, centers, Farmer and Stevens, Bo Stevens from Iowa, another Iowa guy, interior offensive lineman. He's a guard. I ended up going with Slaughter as my pick here. I felt like the Ravens needed a position-specific choice or a specific center available. We do not have an evaluation nor film on him. I don't know, to be honest with you, whether he's better than Lou. I feel like Jones is a category later on as far as, where he should be selected, in my opinion. But getting through the first 4 picks for the Ravens and addressing, guard, center, and getting an incredibly high-level talent like a Ruben Bain, I felt like was a win. That feeds directly into Detroit's pick at 118. I take Bud Clark, the safety from TCU. Great ball skills, but you can see there's significant talent still on the board here. Jonah Coleman, the running back. Jalen Kilgore, super athletic. I wasn't as big of a fan of his man-to-man coverage as other people are. Deion Burks, super fast wide receiver. Detroit doesn't necessarily need help there, obviously, with Jameson Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Isaac Tesla. This is a talented group for Detroit to pick from in the 4th round, in my opinion. A lot of people are really high on VJ Payne. Jacoby Thomas has great ball skills and production from Miami. So there's a lot of ability here, in my opinion, and the option for Brad Holmes to address, defense with 118 and then tight end with 128. There's the picks that I have them making so far. Miller, Hood at 50, somewhat unrealistic that he would be available, and then Sutton at 59, 28 and 59 being available only because of the trade back with the Texans. In the end, I end up taking Bud Clark for a lot of reasons. I feel like the tight end talent stretches a little further than other position groups do in this draft. I mean, edge defender does, but there was an absolute run in this scenario or this simulation near the end of the first round into the second that kind of whittled down options. And, maybe have a little bit of consternation when I did take Colton Hood at 50 because I was worried whether Sutton or Josephs would even be there. In any case, I took Bud Clark. Go watch the film yourself if you want. Not necessarily trying to justify this pick. We're just talking about player ranges. We got 2 evaluations. Jason Smith, who runs Huddle It Up Films. He's a Ravens content creator. For my money, does the best big board that's out there that I get to see, that I get to interact with. James Ogden does a spectacular one as well. I just don't have as much experience interacting with him. But those are 2 Ravens content guys who do amazing, but they're Ravens-centric ones. So if you're a Lions or a Seahawks fan, you may not, be as interested, but just fantastic work if you ask me. And then Karuga Coinage, who's a professional writer, who's actually in my Ravens Discord, he did a really nice write-up on Bud Clark as well. We've got a lot of film down here at the bottom, all of which involves him taking the ball away. And for me, from a Detroit standpoint, if Kirby Joseph is going to be inconsistently available in 2025, you need someone who can replace him, someone who can be that free safety if they are going to continue with, to continue to rely on a man-free structure with a free safety in the middle of the field. I will tell you that another option for me, if he's not signed as of yet, I don't believe he is the veteran Marcus Williams, who used to play for the Ravens, left under auspicious circumstances, let's put it that way, after 2024, with our defensive coordinator, Zach Orr, who really struggled. Marcus Williams was great in a free safety role. To me, he would be a security blanket if Kirby Joseph is unable to go or, has that injury persist through 2026 season. Bud Clark, super talented guy. He was in college for a long time, so he's a little bit older, but great measurables and testing scores as well. So because Brad Holmes and the front office have so many picks in the 4th, 5th, and even the 6th round, I think you're in a great spot to do whatever you want at 128, and you're almost kind of playing to the hand that's dealt you in this draft, and that's the tight end is very deep. There's a ton of talent at tight end and safety, and so you can, I don't want to say rely on the fact that guys like Bud Clark are going to be there, or Justin Jolie as a tight end, and that is who I end up taking, to be honest with you, in this situation. I'm not saying that they'll definitely be there, but the type of player, again, it's the type that is there. The tight end group, man, Max Clare, Lake McCree from USC, Oscar Delp from Georgia. My personal favorite in this draft, besides Eli Stowers for obvious reasons, is Josh Cuevas from Alabama. I didn't take him, to be honest with you. In the end, I ended up taking Joe Lee because of the ability to run after the catch and make plays with the ball in his hand. Can kind of recreate Sam Laporta if Sam Laporta, his injury, if he's not able to return to full health. If you haven't done so on the DraftSignal.pro website, we've got an evaluation from 2 different people, myself included, and then significant film of Joe Lee down here at the bottom that just gives you an idea of what he's capable of with the ball in his hands. In particular, this middle screen against Stanford, I think it's 2024 film on that one, but I could be wrong. Again, the evaluations are done on this website from people across multiple fan bases, Ravens, Lions, Seahawks. In fact, a couple of others were people I reached out to, and they just weren't able to produce anything. I like Joe Lee for the Lions because he gives an Isaiah Likely vibe. There's plays that occur on his film that are a little bit unscripted. He seems to be able to adjust to things well. He's a great option on jump balls or kind of back shoulder throws. Again, the film is linked at the bottom. Super athletic guy, young as well, 21. I think fits with what Detroit is looking for in this draft, especially in the 4th or even the 5th round. I'm going to come back to Detroit's haul here. Again, this is only a rounds 1 through 4 mock for me. This was my favorite collection of talent. These 5 guys here. I'm going to return to these guys at the end and give you some ideas on how I think they specifically help Detroit in 2026 and beyond. The Seahawks haul looks a little bit different because they only had 3 players to select here in this simulation. Pregnon, I think, is a day 1 starter caliber player. To me, slots right in as a right guard to take over from Bradford and really give you a high level group across the front of those 5. Mike Washington would presumably be a day 1 starter or a guy who's going to get a lot of carries, let's put it that way, in a similar system to what they had before where Charbonnet and Walker kind of, alternate possessions at times or even alternate weeks where they're relied upon the most. And then finally, Zakee Wheatley, a safety who I think fits in Seattle's structure perfectly, a guy with a ton of experience. And the reason, let me back that up a little bit. The reason why I say he fits perfectly is he played under Manny Diaz, I think, for 3 seasons in Penn State, but definitely 2. Manny Diaz has since moved on to be the head coach at Duke. Super creative, aggressive, a very organized defensive coordinator from the standpoint of the coverages and the stunts that he uses. Who does that remind you of? Obviously, Mike McDonald. I don't know that Manny Diaz and Mike McDonald bear any relation as far as their scheme, nor that they've ever been exposed to or around each other at all. I like Zakee Wheatley as a fit I like him as a fit for the Lions as well. But in this scenario, I added him to the Seahawks roster, and I think these 3 players fit perfectly with the opportunity to get on the field sooner rather than later, even in the case of Zakee Wheatley. For Baltimore, I feel like I committed the same type of errors in judgment that I have assigned to EDC in the front office the last 2 or 3 or 4 years, and that's having really solid first or second round picks and then kind of veering off the rails, if you will. And in the past, I've attributed that, and I think others have as well, to the Ravens position coaches playing a little bit too big of a role as far as who is selected. Position coaches, move around, not just in the college level, but the NFL as well. Those guys are in and out of there 2 or 3 years, sometimes 4 or 5. And I think that EDC has at times relied upon their evaluation a little bit too much. I maybe did that here with round 3 pick of Bryce Lance, and you could see that Mock Draft Database gave it a B+, and I would agree. Not going offensive line at pick 14 was solely due to the talent that was available. Ruben Bain is a top 5 player in this draft, in my opinion. Incredible hand strength, contact balance. Not just people talk about bend, but not just the ability to bend. It's the ability to do so with contact. So he's accepting or taking contact from an offensive lineman, and at the same time able to veer his way towards the quarterback. His run defense, I think, it speaks for itself. But if you're not familiar, again, check out the DraftSignal.pro website. You can kind of get an idea of the ferocity with which he plays this. As an aside, we are trying to go away from one play clips here at the bottom of the player profiles and provide 2, 3, 4 minute segments of play so people can get a better idea of what they're looking at with a particular player. If you had a normal selection at 14 here for the Ravens, then what I've accumulated for Baltimore wouldn't be as good. Because Bain is the headliner, a day one talent, a day one impact player, I should say, and DeSantis is at minimum serious competition at the guard spot, along with John Simpson and Emory Jones. I feel comfortable comparing this to a typical EDC draft, whereby things kind of go downhill or maybe don't hit the mark. The Bryce Lance pick is still one that I'm confused by and not proud of. While I do really like the player and enjoy the film, again, after watching the Bryce Lance film and Cole Payton, the quarterback, I decided to conduct an off-season film study of NDSU's offense to publish for Twitter, obviously not on YouTube, at least with any film associated with it. I did finally get to the offensive line a second time with the Jake Slaughter selection in round 4. I didn't intend for it to work out this way. Again, the mock drafts have been a fun diversion for me in the last, I'd say, 5 or 6 weeks. Everything has been geared towards the website. In fact, content production on my YouTube channel has significantly fallen off, not because it's the off season, but because so much work went into the DraftSignal.pro website that when I did get the opportunity to do the mock drafts, it was normally to just step away from my work with film organization or the construction of the website. So I didn't intend for the Lions picks to be the best group. I will say that it might not be a coincidence, the best group here among these 3, I should say. It might not be a coincidence that the team that traded back was able to recoup the most talent. It makes it easier when you have surplus selections, obviously. I think the sweet spot for this draft is probably in the 45 to 85 range. And so taking Blake Miller first, at the end of the first round, I think you get a refined. Number one, Chris Aguilera had the right word for him on his eval on the website. Iron Man, he played every single snap at right tackle for Clemson since 2022. So there is, whatever is out there on film for him, NFL front offices will tell us based upon where he's selected. It's my suspicion that Blake Miller will go late first round into early second round. Very athletic guy, moves extremely well. Not an overpowering right tackle, in my opinion. A little bit like maybe a Roger Rosengarten for the Ravens, in that he's somewhat light-ish, but has really great strength, if you ask me. Athletic, is able to anchor down against the bigger pass rushers. I don't know that he's going to be a great player as far as moving people off the ball consistently. 3 technique D tackles he's going to have to down block on, but I think he'll be exceptional on zone schemes, number 1. Number 2, any scheme that asks him to pull to the other side of the formation. Super athletic guy. I like the Colton Hood selection. It's probably the one that is the least athletic, least realistic. He's not I just don't see him being there at pick 50. Detroit may not trade back at all, so they may only have 28 and 50. Things could look drastically different day 1 and day 2 of the draft. I'm probably higher on Dennis Sutton than a lot of other people are, but where we made this choice for Detroit at pick 29, I felt like it fit. Joshua Joseph's still on the board. LT Overton still on the board. Among a couple of other guys like Romello Height, I felt like Dani-Dennis Sutton gave the best of both worlds there, number one. Number two, still very young, a lot of really good football out in front of him. So I would look forward to seeing him anywhere in the NFL for any team that I get the chance to cover, but in particular with Detroit, because I think there's a lot of reps or opportunities, there for him from day one, opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. And then finally addressing the safety and the tight end group, strengthening those groups. I should say Sam Laporta and Jolie as pass-catching options as tight ends would be fantastic, if you ask me. Laporta is an extremely underrated blocker when healthy. Clearly, he was not in 2025. He didn't, finish the season. If he comes back to full health, he's a far better blocker than he gets credit for. It's just that he's such a impactful pass catcher or catcher of the football, dating back to his rookie year of 2023. Jolie, not so much. Jolie is not, in my opinion, a consistent blocker. He's not a guy that would be relied upon at the point of attack a ton. More so like an arc release type blocker where you're releasing to the outside and then maybe reading the defensive end. The Lions don't do a ton of that because Jared Goff isn't going to keep the football and run it, but they do run some RPOs where the tight end releases out into the flats and Goff's either handing the football off or throwing it out into the flats to the tight end. In this case, it would be Jolie. So the usage of him, I think, would be interesting. You could replace Jolie with an Eli Raridan in this selection. Better blocker, taller. He's 6'6", by the way. A significant injury history dating back 4 or 5 years ago. I think consecutive ACL tears, senior year of high school, first year at Notre Dame. I may be wrong with the freshman year injury at Notre Dame, but I think Eli Raridan is a super talented guy. Josh Cuevas, another one, a little bit better blocker than Jolie. So there's a whole lot of options at tight end. I think it's a safer bet for Detroit to address tight end and safety in round 4. You're not going to be able to address tackle or edge defender at all once you get that far into the draft. This was my favorite one, the way that it turned out. These 5 picks for Detroit, I think you're addressing known deficiencies. Taylor Decker, gone. So bring in a guy who can start from day one, someone who you know what you're going to get. Again, there's film of every single Clemson offensive snap since 2022 has included Blake Miller, number one. Number two, addressing the edge defender position, bringing in another corner. I guess in this scenario, maybe grabbing a safety at 50 or 59. A.J. Halsey, could have looked a little bit different, a little bit more realistic, I should say. You guys let me know what you think of these 3 teams, the way that I drafted for them, number one. The content that I tried to produce here, perhaps a little too exhaustive, but I was giving some insight as I understand it. And my understanding is born out of, or my confidence in that understanding, I should say, is born out of the evaluations that have come in from a dozen different people, number one. Number two, the film work that I have done and those guys as well. In some cases, they provided. Chris Aguilera gave me probably 12 or 14 full-length offensive line videos, whereby basically you can just watch a particular player. For example, Blake Miller, you can scroll down at the bottom of his page. Part 1 and Part 2 is each like 3 or 4 minutes long. In any case, my attempt here, my reach may exceed my grasp with this type of content because I'm trying to provide or simulate to you the types of decisions that the front offices will have to make for the Ravens, the Lions, and the Seahawks. 3 different organizations, 3 different perspectives for this year. Obviously, in the case of Seattle winning the Super Bowl, the Ravens and the Lions extremely disappointing 2025 seasons that they're trying to rebound from and address their own specific weaknesses. I appreciate you guys' time. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know in the comment section, number 1. Number 2, if you think other football fans, Ravens, Lions, Seahawks, or whatever, would enjoy this look at a mock draft that was, again, very lofty in terms of my goals, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach.